Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends of the Convention on Cluster Munitions, greetings to you all from Oslo. I hope you can hear me, maybe even see me. All the technicalities are working. My name is Emil Jeremic and I'm the Regional Director with the Department of Mine Action and Disarmament here at MPA Head Office. In the 10th anniversary year of the CCM, MPA is honored to host this side event, which celebrates the successes and lessons learned. In the panel today, we have Davor Laura from the Civil Protection Directorate of the Ministry of Interior, Republic of Croatia, and Nikola Rajnatovic, representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the Republic of Montenegro. Last but not least, we have our own Lucy Pinches, Mine Action Review, of which MPA is a proud supporter and advisory board member, alongside with Halo and MAG. I'm particularly happy that our colleagues from Croatia and Montenegro could join us for this side event today, marking and celebrating their Article 4 completion, joining an increasing number of states that have completed clearance, putting this to number at 11 as of today. And of these 11 states, 10 are state parties to the CCM. So to date, the following state parties have completed clearance in line with Article 4, namely Albania, Republic of Congo, Croatia, Grenada, Guinea-Bissau, Mauritania, Montenegro, Mozambique, and Zambia. In addition, Thailand, which is not a state party to the CCM, but has also completed clearance. Today, let me congratulate Croatia and Montenegro for their successful efforts and Article 4 completion. MPA has been steadfastly committed to the convention from start, from advocating for its creation during the Oslo process leading up to the signing ceremony in Oslo in December 2008, and not least in supporting affected state parties implement it through our many clearance and stockpile destruction programs around the world. As Action 26 of the informal draft Lausanne Action Plan highlights, it is important to learn lessons from one another, probably particularly from and among affected states. Furthermore, we need to transparently discuss challenges on our path to a cluster munition-free world. In line with international cooperation and assistance, as also outlined in the informal draft Lausanne Action Plan, we hope that the example of strong political will and national ownership, as well as country coalition success, for which we commend Norway and Montenegro, that this will serve as a motivation for other state parties to follow a similar recipe, meaning setting clear and realistic deadlines to fulfill their respective Article 4 obligations as soon as possible. Regarding practical matters pertaining to this side event, please mute your microphone if you are not given the floor to speak, and please, to the extent possible, write your questions in the chat box. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the three presentations. With this, I give the floor to Lucy Pinches from the Mine Action Review. Lucy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emil. Christina, if you could please load my presentation. Great. So I'm going to present today on some of the global statistics from this year's Clearing Cluster Munition reports, and then look at some of the key elements for Article 4 implementation. Next slide, please, Christina. We're celebrating 10th anniversary of entry into force of the Convention on Cluster Munitions this year. In the overview of our 2020 report, we've highlighted some of the key lessons learned over the last decade. The report also contains global data from this presentation, as well as country level reports for every contaminated country globally, and is available on the Mine Action Review website. Thanks to our donors, Norway and Switzerland, to our advisory board members, Halo, MAG and MPA, and really to everyone that's contributed data to this year's reports. National authorities, clearance operators, Geneva Centre, UNMAS, UNDP, OSCE and others. Next slide, please. So, celebrating some of the successes, in the last decade, a total of more than 766 square kilometres of cluster munition contaminated area has been cleared. And during survey clearance and spot tasks operations, nearly 1 million unexploded submunitions have been destroyed. So this averages over 250 submunitions destroyed every single day for 10 years, which I think is an amazing achievement. Countless lives and limbs have undoubtedly been saved as a direct result, as well as, of course, the broader contribution to development. Next slide, please. In 2019 alone, a global total of more than 130 square kilometres was cleared of cluster munition remnants, which is a new record high. So we see the clearance rates going up each year. And I think this is in large part thanks to the methodology for surveying clearance of cluster munitions, which has significantly improved over the decade, with high quality evidence-based survey being increasingly employed to good effect, enabling the effective targeting of clearance and efficient use of resources, especially in Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. So looking at the remaining contamination for state parties, where with the exception of the two most heavily contaminated state parties, so that's Laos, PDR and Iraq, the remaining 8 affected state parties could be in a position to fulfil their Article 4 obligations by the 3rd review conference of the CCM, which will take place in 2020. But what is needed for this to happen? So we're going to take a look at some of the good practice and efficient implementation that's needed for this. Next slide, please. The draft Lausanne Action Plan, which, as we've heard this morning, is going to be adopted in February, includes all of the key elements for implementing Article 4 efficiently, effectively and inclusively. And once adopted next year, it will serve as a key implementation tool for the sector. We really congratulate Switzerland for its collaborative approach to the elaboration of the draft action plan in what's been a very challenging year due to COVID-19. It's really excellent that the Lausanne Action Plan has indicators to monitor progress, and Mine Action Review is going to undertake the civil society monitoring of the action plan from next year for indicators related to survey and clearance in a very similar way to what we're doing for the Mine Ban Convention's Oslo Action Plan this year. So I'm going to just go through some of these key elements for Article 4 implementation, and then all of these, of course, must be supported by sufficient and sustained funding all of the way through to completion. Next slide, please. So starting off with national ownership, which is Action 1 of the draft action plan and is rightly up front and centre in it. National ownership is absolutely critical for the success of Article 4 implementation, and this includes implementing integrating clusters into the broader frameworks. It's also about making national contributions towards implementation. So in the case of Article 4, that's towards the cost of mine action centres and also to survey and clearance of cluster munitions. Next slide, please. Moving on to strategic planning and concrete action plans. So affected state parties must develop evidence-based and costed multi-year national strategies and annual work plans. Ideally, strategies should have their own built-in indicators to enable progress to be assessed. Planning is absolutely essential to Article 4 implementation. The adage, fail to plan, plan to fail, is cliched but very true. It's also useful to note that the 10 remaining affected state parties to the CCM, all except for Chile and Germany, mine contamination. So it's important for work plans to ensure synergies and consideration of both contamination types and respective treaty obligations for those states that are also party to the Mine Ban Treaty. Next slide, please. So moving on to evidence-based and accurate baseline. So an accurate baseline is or should be the starting point for all successful national mine action programmes. And it should be established for a combination of evidence-based, non-technical and technical survey. And I think we've seen that high quality survey can be achieved without excessive expenditure, and it's crucial. Knowing the extent of remaining contamination is also critical for informing planning for completion. We've seen historically that mistakes in survey can hugely exaggerate the extent of the problem and lead to clearance resources being wasted on uncontaminated areas. Next slide, please. Moving on to strong standards, the International Mine Action Standards, IMAS, have been developed to improve safety, efficiency and effectiveness in mine action and to promote a common and consistent approach to the conduct of mine action operations. They really constitute industry best practice for safe and effective mine action operations. The IMAS are intended to be adapted to the national context in the form of national mine action standards, so that programmes can take into account local circumstances, such as issues such as clearance depths, etc. Next slide, please. Phoenix Insight has developed a very valuable online repository for IMAS of all of the normative references, so all of the shalls, the shoulds, the mays, and that's on an online searchable database that's available on mineaction.net. And I think this tool really makes the IMAS more accessible than ever, and it provides a really valuable tool for the mine action sector. So we encourage national authorities and implementing partners to make use of it. Next slide, please. Moving swiftly on to efficient land release methodology. What is that? Essentially, it's evidence-based survey and targeted clearance. The survey of cluster munition contaminated areas is usually simpler than the case for mined areas, where, for example, it's known that no mines are present. Surveyors are typically allowed to enter the suspected area with detectors to search for unexploded submunitions. Clearance should only be conducted where there is direct evidence of submunitions. I think since the adoption of the CCM, the methodology for surveying clearance of cluster munitions has really significantly improved. The scale and the nature of contamination in Southeast Asia, which dates back decades, necessitated a more systematic evidence-based non-technical and technical survey response that confirms contamination based on direct evidence. And a specific methodology for identifying and confirming cluster munition contamination was developed, known as Cluster Munition Remnant Survey, CMRS. And CMRS has really helped result in a more accurate understanding of the scale of contamination and the time and resources required for clearance. And based on this data, authorities and operators in Southeast Asia are able to make more informed decisions when planning for and prioritising clearance operations. Since it was first introduced in Southeast Asia in 2008, the CMR process has and continues to be improved by sharing successes and challenges in implementation and discussing lessons learned. CMRS is being employed in Cambodia, Laos PDR and Vietnam, and a modified form has more recently been employed also in Iraq, Kosovo and Tajikistan. In August of last year, a regional workshop on CMRS took place in Vietnam, convened by the US Department of State and facilitated by MPA, and attended by national authorities and operators from Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam, as well as a Geneva Centre. I think this workshop really helped to identify, develop and share best practice in Southeast Asia. So good coordination, sorry, next slide please. Good coordination mechanisms. Mine Action Review has seen directly that providing an informal and collaborative platform for all stakeholders to discuss challenges and progress in clearance can help improve coordination of Article 4 implementation and demonstrate strong national ownership and political commitment to completion. We really encourage all affected state parties to look to establish country coalitions and to work transparently and openly with operators and other partners towards completion. Of the remaining affected CCM state parties with Article 4 obligations, Afghanistan, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Lebanon have such forums and coalitions in place. Next slide, please. We really encourage national authorities and implementing partners to also make use of Mine Action Review's country-specific report findings and recommendations for action to help guide discussions in such forums. Next slide, please. Moving on to planning for residual contamination. So in states that were once heavily contaminated, munitions will be found after completion has been declared. And effective states must plan for this and establish sustainable long-term national capacity to address contamination discovered post-completion. And this must be commenced well in advance of completion. So this includes assessing where capacity is best placed, be it within armed forces, police, civil protection, or another appropriate entity. And equally importantly, considering where the information management database will be housed. So ensuring that when cluster munitions are discovered post-completion or land has been released already, it's possible to see what, if any, operations have been conducted in that location in question and to what depth clearance has been conducted. Next slide, please. So just very finally, looking at programme performance in 2019, let me say I'm very happy to be on the panel with colleagues from Croatia and Montenegro and to be able to warmly congratulate them on completion of cluster munition clearance. These are two top-ranking countries for performance in 2019. I've covered Mine Action Review's research in the Balkans now for several years and have visited both national authorities on field trips, taken part in regional workshops, and it's really great to see both these states reach the finishing line within their original 10-year treaty deadlines. I'm looking forward to hearing both presentations from Davor and Nicola, which I think are going to provide some illustrative examples of many of the points I've just covered briefly and some lessons learned for other affected states. And I really hope that Mine Action Review's country-level recommendations for action and our analysis can also really serve as a useful tool for helping some of those state parties that have room for improvement to identify and overcome challenges and increase the rate of progress between now and the next review conference. Just to highlight, Mine Action Review really is a collaborative effort, and everything that we produce is offered in the spirit of openness and constructive dialogue to help enable the mine action community to develop the measures that are needed to overcome challenges and complete clearance effectively and efficiently. I think as a sector, just to finish, we have the tools and knowledge of what's needed for efficient survey and clearance programmes, and I really hope that by the next review conference in 2025, we're celebrating seeing many more of these states having reached completion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy, for a very informative, clear, and not least encouraging presentation. And now it is my pleasure to give the floor to our colleague and friend, Mr. Davor Laura, from the Civil Protection Directorate of the Ministry of Interior from the Republic of Croatia. Davor, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Emil. Good morning to you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for our invitation. Of course, thanks MPA for invitation, and I to be here at this side event. With this presentation, I would like to briefly present for all of us in Croatia a very important achievement. Next slide, please. The Republic of Croatia signed the Convention on Cluster Munition on 3rd December 2008 and ratified on 17 August 2009. It was among the first 30 ratifications that triggered the Convention's entry into force on 1st August 2010. Croatia has participated in every meeting of the Convention and hosted the Convention's first review conference in Dubrovnik in 2015. Croatia voted in favor of United Nations resolution promoting the Convention in December 2017. It has firmly condemned the use of cluster munition and elaborated its view on certain important issues relating to the Convention's interpretation and implementation. The Republic of Croatia main challenges were to destroy all stored cluster munition with a deadline of 1st August 2018, according to Article 3, and to clear all of its cluster munition remnants contaminated territory, deadline of 1st August 2020, according to Article 5 of the Convention. Next slide, please. The cluster munition contaminated area was originally identified and determined in 8 counties and 28 towns of the Republic of Croatia as a consequence of Homeland War conflict where the aggression side used the different types of cluster munitions in the period 1992 to 1995. Total hazardous area was initially determined up to 5.3 square kilometers of cluster munition remnants contaminated areas back in 2010. Next slide, please. Croatia completed the destruction of its stockpile of 7,235 cluster munitions and more than 178,000 submunitions at the end of July 2018. This process was the responsibility of the Ministry of Defense and conducted through 2 interrelated phases. Research and development phase that included MPA Shadow program and elimination phase. I would like to take this opportunity to thank MPA for its support and valuable expert technical advice. Next slide, please. The elimination phase included the following activities: industrial demilitarization, destruction by open burning and open destruction obsolete stocks from 2011 to 2015 by a private company ICL Spreewerk. Clearance operation after explosion at storage site Pajane in 2011 caused by forest fire. Among other, ERW and CM stockpiles were destroyed and 5 square kilometers radius area was affected and contaminated with the UXO. In the last stage, until 2018 deadline, more than 110 tons of remaining cluster munition was disposed by Croatia Armed Force. Next slide, please. Cluster munition remnant contaminated area are defined using non-technical survey method and in many cases in combination with targeted technical survey. This integrated approach has proven to be extremely effective. Also, we established a mathematical method for precise definition of cluster munition remnants contaminated areas based on technical and constructional characteristics of cluster munitions and submunitions used in Croatia. On this slide, you can see the sum of main challenges we faced in defining the scope of CMR contamination, such as unknown location and direction of military action, unknown number and quantity of used cluster munition, finding records and reports of clearance activity that were previously conducted, and finding clues was made more difficult by unauthorized movement or relocation of CMR. Next slide, please. In the 2010 and 2020 period, clearance activities resulted in more than 5.3 square kilometers of land release, along with more than 2,800 cluster munition remnants found and destroyed. As of August 2020, Croatia is free of known CMR contamination. Main challenges in clearance activities were limited use of clearance methods, dense vegetation and inability to use machines, high sensitivity of CMR and influence of the atmospheric conditions. In soft soils, CMR was found at greater depths up to half meter. Safety conditions for destruction and findings of CMR along edge areas which causes the expansion of clearance zones. Next slide, please. Some briefly on international cooperation and assistance. Croatia was among the first 30 ratifications that triggered the Convention's entry into force on 1st August 2010 and dedicatedly promotes the CCM in all of its international cooperation mine action efforts. We are especially proud that the first review conference of the CCM took place in Dubrovnik, in Croatia, in September 2015 and resulted with the Dubrovnik Action Plan. Croatia supports the guidelines of the Lausanne Action Plan and will continue to promote convention norms and their full implementation. Croatia determined to show strong commitment against any use of cluster munition to promote the convention, including through international and regional events, and ready to share experiences. And my last slide. On this slide, you can see the key factors that contributed towards the efficient elimination of the cluster munition remnants problem in the Republic of Croatia. First, development of national standard and modeling of land release processes. Ensuring stable sources of financing. Continuous implementation of non-technical and targeted technical survey and establishment of a methodology for precise definition of hazardous areas based on technical and constructional characteristics of cluster munitions and submunitions used. Implementation of detailed analysis of the results obtained by the conducted clearance operation and their implication for further reconstruction of hazardous areas. Marking and continuous maintenance of the marking of defined CMR areas. Providing continuous informing and risk educating the population about the dangers of cluster munition as an integral part of submunition clearance effort. And finally, establishing the quality management during the land release process. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Davor, for an excellent presentation showcasing Croatia's success in completing clearance in accordance with Article 4. Now I will give the floor to our colleague Nikola Ražnatović, representing the permanent mission of Montenegro to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva. Please, Nikola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Let me begin by thanking Norwegian People's Aid for organizing this side event on celebrating successes and learning lessons from CCM Article 4 completion. You have been recognized for your activities over the years to promote the values and norms of the Convention. I would also like to cordially welcome other panelists and thank them for their congratulations. I'm honored to have the opportunity on behalf of the Government of Montenegro to thank the Government of Norway and NPA for the assistance in completing clearance of our territory of cluster munition remnants before the original deadline under the Convention. Also, it is my pleasure to congratulate our Croatian colleagues and friends. Today, during the second review conference, it is worth recalling that for the last 10 years, the Convention on Cluster Munitions, guided by the principle of humanity, has made it possible to save many lives and prevent many injuries around the world. As you are aware, clearance of the national territory of cluster munition remnants has a direct impact on preventing the death and casualties of civilians. This is why Article 4 and its deadline must be respected. In this regard, the country coalition concept also plays an important role as it enables the compensation of insufficient national capacities for the effective fulfillment of obligations under the Convention. Now, let me share with you a few highlights from the implemented country coalition between Montenegro and Norway and MPA as an operator, which has contributed that Montenegro successfully fulfilled its obligations under Article 4 at the end of July. Montenegro had an obligation to complete the cleanup of its territory contaminated with cluster munitions remnants, but unfortunately our national capacities were not sufficient to carry it out within the time frame provided for in the Article 4. During the conference held in Bosnia and Herzegovina, officials from the Ministry of Interior of Montenegro commenced intense communication with NPA on starting cooperation in these activities. In 2012 and 2013, NPA provided to our authorities training for performing external quality control, supported strengthening of our capacities, and also conducted a detailed non-technical survey which provided a clear baseline and evidence base for the future interventions under Article 4. As a result of an agreement between the governments of Montenegro and Norway, the Ministry of Interior and NPA in 2018 signed a Memorandum of Understanding on the implementation of the program on land release of areas contaminated with cluster munition remnants in Montenegro. The Norwegian government provided funding for this project of around 1.2 million euros. In this project, as a contracting party, Montenegro has committed to destroy the remnants of cluster munitions and to perform external quality control. As an operator, the NPA fulfilled other obligations which were financed by the Norwegian government. The joint arrangement is characterized by strong ownership of the Montenegrin authorities and their active participation, which has contributed to reducing donors' costs. The transparent discussion has always been present between the Montenegrin authorities and the NPA team. The crown of joint efforts of Montenegro, Norway, and the NPA was when, after the final quality control, the clear land was handed over to civilians and companies for safe future use. The field work continued in controlled conditions related to the COVID-19 pandemic, for which we are especially grateful to the NPA representatives. Therefore, we consider the fulfillment of the obligations under Article 4 of the Convention to be a joint success. Guided by this very positive experience of the country coalition with Norway, Montenegro is willing to share its experience with other countries. To this end, Montenegro has already agreed to be one of the coordinators for international cooperation and assistance for the conventional cluster munitions. Let me inform you that the Netherlands and Montenegro, as two thematic coordinators, have prepared a brochure on the concept of the country coalition for international cooperation and assistance, with the valuable inputs of our partners, convinced that it will be useful for affected states. This brochure will be available on the CCM website soon. We would like to encourage all countries requiring international cooperation and assistance to turn to donor countries and operators to look to proactively request support and establish country coalitions and to work transparently and openly with operators and other partners towards completion of their obligations within the Article 4 deadline. Last but not least, I feel obliged to express my great gratitude to the ICU of the Convention, Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, the Cluster Munitions Coalition, and Mine Action Review, and other organizations for their contribution to the promotion of international cooperation and assistance. We also thank Switzerland for making the issue of international cooperation and assistance as one of the priorities of their presidency. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ražnatović, for your very informative intervention, as well as your kind words, sir. Much appreciated. We will now open the floor for questions, and this can be done in two ways on this MS Teams application. Namely, you can raise your hand, or you can just write the question in the meeting chat. While we are waiting for questions, while you all participants are thinking hard about this, after all this very informative and brilliant, I think, interventions, I suppose there are some questions I would like to pose my friend and colleague, Mr. Davor Laura, a question regarding Croatia's experience, keeping in mind that Croatia is definitely one of those affected states, formerly we should say with cluster munitions, but still not so unfortunately regarding landmines and also other types of explosive remnants of war. But definitely Croatia is one of the states with the most advanced institutions for dealing with this legacy. And Davor, you touched upon international cooperation and assistance, which Mr. Ražnatović also touched upon from Montenegro's side. I was just wondering, how do you see, it's a big question I know, but Croatia, how can Croatia also support, you think, other affected states with relevant sharing or experience or other issues, you think? Davor, if you could hear the question.
Sorry, but I didn't hear your question.
The question is,
some problem.
Can you hear me now, Davor?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Regarding Croatia's history and the strong institutions associated with mine action in the Republic of Croatia, you touched upon in your presentations international cooperation and assistance. But my question to you is not the assistance to Croatia, but from Croatia. How do you foresee that Croatia can support other affected states with your valuable experience? That is my question, sir.
Thank you for your questions. The Croatia is, as always, and the Croatian Mine Action Center, Civil Protection Directorate is open for all kind of cooperation with other countries, and we are ready to share of all our experiences and exchanging experiences to all country which have some problems with cluster munitions. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Davor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that indeed. Any other questions or comments from anyone, including our panelists? Lucy has a question. I hear. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Hi, yeah, more of a comment actually, just to thank also Davor and Nicola for their excellent presentations. And I think you just also touched upon it, Emil. I think it's good to emphasize that, you know, and appreciate that Croatia managed to fulfill its Article 4 cluster munition obligations within its deadline, despite having the bigger challenge of landmines. And with Montenegro also managing to fulfill its cluster munition clearance, whilst also having the greater issue of ERW contamination. And I think it's important to note that this also serves as a good example to those other state parties that have got mine contamination to kind of help balance treaty obligations and to prioritize clearance of cluster munitions. We see Bosnia and Herzegovina is asking for extension request and is hoping to complete in the next 18 months. But yeah, just to comment on that and to congratulate both for meeting the obligation and appreciating the complex nature of the contamination. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Any other questions or comments?
Davor has a question.
Question or comment from Davor, please. The floor is yours. Excuse me, the question was from our colleague
Sebastian Kasek. Hello, Sebastian. Good to see you. I think it's very complicated, and we will need more than 1 hour to explain our mathematical method. But it is based specifically on KB1 submunitions and their constructional and technical characteristics. So it depends on situation, it depends on the place where the submunition found, state of submunition, is it armed or not armed? Because if you know, the mostly submunitions which are nearby the eggs of the rockets mainly will not be exploded. So we know the dimension of the patterns, and if we find submunitions that are not armed, we will know that is in most situations it is on the center of the ellipse of the explosion.
Yeah, it gives an idea. Thank you so much, Davos. Yeah.
It's very complicated, but
Good, thanks.
Good to see you, Sebastian. Thank you for your question. Another observation, maybe. I think I'm not alone when we work politically regarding advocacy for the universalization of the CCM. I think that many affected states are a bit reluctant to join exactly because of the obligations associated with Article 4. That's also why I think it's so important for to share the success stories of states such as Croatia and Montenegro, as we have witnessed here in this side event today, and to share this experience with other affected states. But of course, this is also a big issue involving the affected states themselves and also our colleagues in the NGO environment, as we have been also very active in the Oslo process, obviously, in the coalition leading up to the signing conference in Oslo in December 2008. But also during the Oslo process, we had a joint conference with affected states hosted by the government of Serbia in Belgrade it was in October 2007, also feeding into the convention text that was the issue and intention at the time, namely the concerns of affected states. But still, we are far from getting where we want to be, namely a cluster-free a world free of cluster munitions. So I think in this further process, it's very important to draw on this experience from affected states and share it with other affected states for practical solutions, etc. Non-technical survey, technical survey, clearance, land release processes, SOPs, etc. Lessons learned to share this, but also as encouragement of affected states that have still not acceded to the convention. I don't know if we have other questions, comments. Anyone, dear colleagues? Don't be shy. We have in principle 7 minutes left of this side event.
Luis Maresca raised hand.
Mr. Lou Maresca raised his hand here. Dear Lou, please take the floor.
Hello, Emil, and it's good to see and hear you. You look very nice in the suit there. Just a question to the two panelists, because I first of all want to congratulate them for the work they've done and their accomplishments. I think it's a really important achievement and also a moment for the convention to have these two countries, particularly from the same region, who are kind of in the lead on this. It's just a general question. As it is two countries and programs from the same part of the world, I was just wondering the extent to which, during the process of fulfilling your Article 4 obligations, the two countries interacted or shared experiences or had dialogue with each other while each was going through this process at the same time. So, thanks. Over.
Yes, thank you for the question. Sorry, Mr. Ražnatović, do you want to take the floor, sir?
Yes, please. I would like to thank Mr. Maresca for his question. Of course, that there was exchange of experiences between our two national mine action teams, and it is very often that during events or conferences, representative of mine action team they have informal between themselves, but also with the operators. So it is very good practice and very useful to make some concrete project. It was also the case with our National Mine Action Center. They at first they had informal communication with representatives of MPA, and after that we went it more formally, and we together analyzed which were possibilities, which were the needs, and that was initial step to go further and to complete successfully this project. So that mutual and informal exchanges are very, very useful for the completion of obligations at the national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ražnatović, for your answer. I understand, Lucy, you raised your hand. The floor is yours, Lucy, please.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say, kind of from the treaty side, to acknowledge the part. There was a very good regional workshop in 2017 that was convened by the Netherlands and Norway as co-coordinators on clearance for the CCM, in which the ISU also attended, and operators. And I think that was on kind of planning, on sharing experiences. I know Croatia was there, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo. So the importance of those kind of regional workshops and how the treaty can also help facilitate those, I think was an excellent example of kind of regional cooperation as well. And that kicked off some of these discussions about country coalitions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Indeed, hopefully also other relevant regional instruments can be used, like in, for instance, Greater Mekong region or Southeast Asia. We have RMAC with a mandate under ASEAN to work on 4 of the 5 pillars of mine action, except victim assistance. So that is also a potential for regional cooperation and sharing of experience, lessons learned, etc. Among those affected states in Southeast Asia, for example. Any other questions or comments, dear colleagues? I see we have 3 minutes left of the side event. No further questions or comments. I suppose people are running back to the plenary. Let me thank very much our dear colleagues and presenters, Davor Laura, Nikola Ražnatović, and Lucy Pinches, for their very valuable interventions. Highly appreciated. Thanks a lot to Kristina Đurić here at the head office and Jon Toven from IT department, making this event, since it's done on Teams, less nerve-wrenching for us, or those of us, I speak for myself, that are still in the learning process regarding the MS Teams application. Thank you very much to all the participants, and best of wishes for the rest of the conference. Thank you all. Take care and stay out of the COVID. All the best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.